So I'll put the recording on. Hope that's okay with everybody else here. And we can, maybe Ruth, would you like to say a few words as well, like I've just said, along the lines?
Yes, I'm obviously work at Kingston University. I really kind of enjoy, strangely enough, doing systematic reviews. Slightly addicted to them. My area is education and the use of technology in education specifically. I've effectively worked previously as a teacher in primary education, and then moved into initial teacher education, and now kind of occupy almost a higher education perspective, I suppose, in my work. So that's pretty me in a nutshell. But
Thank you. Thank you. And then there is Edith Rigby as well, who's here, who's our communications officer. Edith, would you like to just say a few words about anything, the group and
Yes, thank you, Manish. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this Tech Thursday meeting. So the Tech Thursdays happen every month, usually the third Thursday of the month, and we welcome speakers from all sorts of background and context as well. So if you ever felt like contributing to the session, you're welcome to reach out to us. You don't have to be part of the South region. We, as I say, we welcome everyone. And as Manish has said, this session will be recorded and made available on our YouTube channel. And Manish, just to let you know, we can't see your slide in full screen view. It's just still in.
No, I haven't yet. I haven't yet.
Brilliant.
I haven't yet. Yeah.
Thank you.
No, we were just doing the chit chat before I did the presentation. But thank you for that and reminding me about the YouTube channel. I mean, we've been very, very fortunate to have very good speakers come in and talk to us in the past. And our YouTube channel, I'm sure link will be posted in a few seconds by Edith. If you can pull it out, please, and share it with the people here. And that has some very good sessions from the past if you have the time and interest to look at that. But anyway, so without further ado, I shall make a start. My name is Manish Malik, and I'm the chair for the All South group. I'm sorry about that noise in the background. I'm working currently for Canterbury Christchurch University as the faculty director for learning and teaching. And I'm also a visiting prof at McGill University in their engineering department, which takes me there 2 to 3 times a year. So I'll be going back there in June. Anyways, so what are we going to do today is we're going to go through these points, not all of them, but we'll make a start. And depending upon your interest, we could tailor the session to either look at some systematic reviews together, or ask each other as to what our interests are. Sorry about that noise. Yeah, I'm delivering a training later on. Ooh, it's getting worse. I think it might be lunchtime, so people are scanning in their cards here, and that's what the noise is. Apologies for that. So where was I? Oh gosh, this is not going to work. There's a whole team of people. Perhaps it's quieter here. Sorry. Yeah, apologies. So let me look at what is a systematic review, how to do it, why to do it, etc. And then we may have a little bit of interaction between us to identify what is it that you are interested in particular. And if we find there is already good interest, then that's fine. Otherwise, I have something else in my mind as well to get us to delve into this a little bit more. Well, I just use the word which AI uses, delve into. Strange. Okay. Right. So I'm going to jump on straight to the process slide, which is a bit further down. So first of all, what is a systematic review? Systematic review is a method of doing a literature review in a way that it can be replicated by other people so that they can rely, and it's all all the steps are reported in the paper itself so that people um, can see and can develop some trust in the methodology, and therefore in the work that you produce. So and they're a good way, therefore, to present big studies, big literature reviews, compared to things like narrative reviews. Narrative reviews are, let's say, somebody who's very well known in their field, and they then um, create a literature review or narrative review of their own field. Of course, they people will believe them because they are higher up in their field in number of years experience, etc. But it could be open to some kind of critique on the basis that, oh, maybe perhaps they just chose the papers that they agree with, and they didn't choose the papers that they didn't agree with. So to avoid that kind of, you know, critique, the systematic approach follows this process. So you start off by having a question or a problem formulated, like what is it that you want to study about a particular field? What are you interested in? Now, even within that very simple statement, systematic reviews force you to look at what population of, either its students or its workers, whatever it is that you're interested in. You will define the finer details of that problem space, if you like, or the research question, if you like. So it becomes a very narrow endeavor. You talk about, let's say, engineering students, or I don't know, business students, and you only want to know how this population um, performs or perceives a particular thing. And in the case of technology enhanced learning, it could be, let's say, artificial intelligence, or I don't know, simple things like clicker systems, or it could be any sort of technology that you're interested in, that you want to evaluate whether people in general who are using this technology are perceiving it as an enjoyable experience. So that could be the outcome. What is it that you're interested in? Is it the enjoyment that people are getting from that experience, or is it their learning, or is it something else? So systematic review really asks you to have that very clear up in front and stated in your paper, so you will look at some examples, and I'll highlight this as well again, that level of detail should be very much there in your research question to start off. Okay. And once you have that, the next step in the process is to do, okay, now you can go and search the databases. So everybody familiar, I hope, with Google Scholar, right? So that is one way to search literature, but that's only one way. There are many other databases like Scopus, Web of Science, ACM Digital. There's many. For each field, almost there's one or more even database. So in those databases, what you do, just like in Google Scholar, you will type in a search clause. So even the search clause has to align with your initial definition of your research question. Remember, the research question will have elements like its population, its outcome that you're interested in. So there is a framework for that. It's called PICO, population, intervention, comparison, and and outcome. So if you don't worry, if you think you need to make notes of it, because what I will do is I will share these slides with you later on, and in the slide, the PICO framework is defined. It's much earlier on. I usually cover that first, but I think because of this compressed time, um, so that's just one framework, PICO. There are other frameworks you could use depending upon the type of evidence that you want to um, synthesize the literature review from. It could be that you're interested in only quantitative studies. It could be that you're interested in quantitative and qualitative studies, or it could be that you're interested in mixed method studies. So for different needs, there are different frameworks to pick from. Let me just show you. Yeah, so there are these links which you will be able to benefit from later on. Okay, and so that's a research question that I was talking about. So it says in undergraduate students, which is the population, which is quite broad. We're not defining the discipline. We could define the discipline to reduce the number of search results, or we just want to have a generic idea of what happens to undergraduate students. So in undergraduate students, does the implementation of flipped learning. Now, this is a technology enhanced learn term because a lot of the flipped learning relies on using videos and quizzes and stuff outside, but also inside. You might use clicker systems and things like that. So that's a relevant question, I would say. So it does the implementation of flipped learning, which is the I in the PICO term, intervention, results in improved academic performance. So you're not interested in the enjoyment factor or anything. You're categorically interested in the academic performance, which is then measured by some kind of exam or some standardized test, etc., etc. And then it's also important to include a comparative because what is it that it's better compared to? So that's the C term in the PICO framework. Okay, so you have compared to traditional lecture-based instruction. Often we compare flipped learning with the traditional um, lecture-based in normal discussions amongst peers in teaching and learning environments. But this question puts it right up front and center that this is what you are interested in. Now, with this, of course, you go into the next stage, which is designing your search terms. Your search terms you can see are based on these factors. The population will be mentioned, undergraduate students, college students, university students. You can find multiple synonyms for this term of undergraduate students because different people use different terms when they're writing papers. But they mean the same thing. For example, undergraduate versus college versus university. But it could also mean the masters as well. But you don't want to skip out just because somebody is referring to undergraduate students as university students. They didn't categorically say undergraduate, but they are actually maybe talking about undergraduate in their paper. So that paper becomes relevant. So we include it as an or term, which means even if it says if a paper says undergraduate, that should be picked up. If a paper says university, that should also be picked up. So it's all is like everybody in, all in. So that's the or term. But obviously, if everything comes in, then it makes it very difficult for you to then sift through all of those thousands of papers, and therefore you use some and terms as well. And terms are between these broader categories: population, intervention, outcome, comparison. Every and term sort of separates these, but within the each of these terms, population, comparison, outcome, you could have multiple terms separated by ors, which basically expands the scope. But if you look at this whole search clause, it is basically if a paper talks about undergraduate and flipped classroom and traditional instruction is mentioned and academic performance is the focus, that paper gets picked up. So that's how it works. So you expand a little bit, but you also try to contain the flow of papers that come to you because there will be thousands still. There's a lot of it. These are commonly used terms. So there'll still be a lot of papers which you'll have to sift through. Okay, so let's go back to our slide 20, which is the good sort of representation of the whole process. Now, once you've got that a list of, let's say, 1,000 papers to through from and select, you need to apply something called as your inclusion and exclusion criteria. Now remember, this is a systematic review methodology, and in this methodology what we do is we even define the inclusion and exclusion criteria right up front, and we use the same framework we used to define the problem, the research question, the search clause. So again, you expect to have some population related inclusion criteria as defined and exclusion criteria as well. For instance, you could say, I want to have face-to-face students, papers which talk about face-to-face undergraduate students. Okay. You may not necessarily include this face-to-face element in your search clause because then it gets a bit too unwieldy. So you say, when I read a paper, and if it's talking about online students, I'm going to reject it because that's not related to flipped classroom anyway. There might be a paper which talks about flipped classroom as a technology, very good, but then it's actually focusing completely on online. So I will have to exclude it. So it could be in your exclusion criteria that all online learning settings I am not interested in. Or it could just be something else that you are not interested in. So you could say that upfront in your exclusion criteria. And when you're reading the abstract, when you're reading the paper, you can apply the inclusion and exclusion criteria and record how many papers you chose that were excluded because of a particular reason. And that level of detail can be included in your final paper, where you're saying, oh, I had 1,000 to start with, out of which 500 were not fit for the not about this the right population. Another 100 were not right for the intervention. It was not flipped classroom at all. It was something else. And in some they were talking enjoyment, so the outcome wasn't a match. So that way you can reduce, but as you reduce, you're recording your decisions and making it available to the research community, so that they can develop some kind of trust in your work. So that's how we go about going the screening. And really, one thing to mention here is the screening happens in the first stage of systematic review. It happens on the title. So you read the title and you make a judgment, but you also read the abstract. So title and abstract screening, it's called. And in that phase, I would expect something like 30% of the search results to remain. Everything else will go out, more or less, and you will have a reason for everything that you exited from the pool of 1,000, let's say, to start with. Okay. And then after that, so there is the second stage of screening, which is called as the full text screening. So there's the abstract and title screening, and then there is the full text screening. And in the full text screening, what you do, you read the paper again, you read the full paper again, and some of those papers might not be accessible to you at all. You have its title, you have its abstract, but you do not have the paper itself. So those papers will also have to go out, because you can't access them, and it's no good having a paper published which is not accessible to researchers. You put it behind some dodgy publication company who wants to charge people, and also you've not put the paper available to public through your institution's repository. So so that's a bit of a missed opportunity for the author. So you will chuck that paper out because nobody can reach to it. What's the point? Okay, so once you have access to some papers, you then start to read it, and you apply the same inclusion exclusion criteria again, and you say, well, some of these papers are now very relevant, so they are a keep, and there are some which are not so relevant, so they are going to be rejected, but I will record the ones which are being rejected and the reason. Okay. Now, once I think at this stage you can actually extract more data from the paper itself. Now, what kind of data would you extract from a paper? You could extract, of course, the population, the intervention, the outcome, the comparison. But you could extract things like methodology. What did people do? Did they do quantitative study here? Did they do qualitative? Did they state which theoretical framework was used in studying this in this work at all, and so on? So how many people were there? What's the split between male and female? The demographics. What was the effect size of the intervention? So let's say somebody says flipped classroom is really good against traditional teaching and learning. Why it's really good, they go on and explain, because this technology helps collaboration, this technology helps consuming content beforehand, and that technology does this. So they give that in a wonderful detail. Now, how do they know that it is wonderful? They must state some kind of data about people's performance against comparing it with the traditional classroom. So when you have that level of data, what you can do is you can calculate an effect size, which is basically a mathematical number which says that compared to traditional, this method has a gain, if you like, and it is effective, and that effect is quantified with this effect size. Now, there's a mathematical formula that you use to do that. Sometimes people don't put that because they don't have access to the formula, they don't know how to do that, but they will tell you the results in terms of how many people scored, or what was their average in both of the settings, the traditional method and the flipped classroom, for instance. And they're measuring the same thing, it's the same test, everything is same, just the scores are different because people were taught differently and using different technologies, and no technology in the comparator, for example. So that way you can get some sense of the power or the effectiveness of that technology that was introduced in that particular case. Now, once you've done that for one study, of course, you can extend that work over to multiple studies. And if all the studies were done in a similar way that you are looking at, and they can generate some data points which you can then process um, in a way using a meta-analysis tool. Um, I'm talking now quantitative data here. You could pretty much do a secondary analysis of those effect sizes and come up with a combined effect size and say, well, Joe Bloggs did this study. He found the effect size was 1, and somebody else did the study again, but they thought that the effect size was zero point 0.2. And somebody else did, they got 0.5. Now, what is the overall known effect size? So, so meta-analysis is about taking these effect sizes, their populations, their conditions that these studies were carried out in, and then you can combine them together into one figure and say, well, now this effect size represents all the populations that were studied, all the students, the numbers of people who were studied, and therefore it is a little bit more value than those individual studies. So you're combining multiple studies, just like a review does, basically. But meta-analysis is a quantitative, as a quantitative tool, is a quantitative way to come up with a number that represents all the studies that were there. Now, it's not always possible to do a meta-analysis because the studies are vastly different. Therefore, the meanings of the numbers that each of the study actually report, they can't really be combined together. Now, if that's the case, and that's a judgment, and that comes with experience as you progress deep into this subject. But there's also another kind of meta-analysis, which is the meta-analysis which is qualitative. You could use frameworks like or approaches like thematic analysis of the results section of the paper, or their methodology, or whatever the findings. You could start to theme up what the authors are saying, different authors are saying. Once you have a short listed of number of studies, you can read each section, each paper's finding section, limitation section, etc., and start extracting that data. And then once you have a list of various findings, you can then start to theme them up. And that work can lead to creation of some kind of frameworks, some kind of summarization, synthesis of the field that you are interested in, and so on. Okay. And once you reach that stage, that's pretty much the bulk of the work is done by that time, because you would have gone through thousands of abstracts, maybe hundreds of full papers, and so on and so forth, and then done the analysis, whether it is qualitative or it's quantitative. You would have done a lot of work by that time, and you along the way you've been recording everything. Now, this is not a linear process as it might be perceived as, with this up arrow going this way. It's not a linear process at all. It's quite iterative. Because, for example, you created a question, and then you ask that search, you use the search term, but then you find that there's no paper coming up, or there's too many coming up. Whichever the case, you may want to fine tune the question such that either, let's say, nothing was coming up, and then the question could be broadened a little bit so that more studies can be synthesized in that area. Equally, if it was a very, very vast topic and there's hundreds and thousands of papers, and you don't have the physical capacity to study that many papers. So you would want to maybe you actually asked a question which was too broad, so you would narrow it down. How do you narrow it down? Well, instead of saying undergraduate studies, maybe you are interested only in business students or electronics engineering students or something like that. So you could narrow it down quite easily by tweaking your search terms. So once that iteration is done, you can then begin your title and abstract screening. You can then do the full text read stage, and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's pretty much about the whole process, and that these iterations actually can happen at any point, and sometimes it is more work than you know. So it's good to be mindful of the iterative nature right in the early stages, because imagine if it happens here, all of the work that you've done up until that point kind of comes at stake. So you shape your research question, your search terms, such that you don't have to then come back to it all over again. But that comes with experience. It's not something I can tell you that you do and that'll work. So pretty much it's a trial and error, or with time you learn those things. Yeah, so once you've done all the recording, the next stage is you write it up, you disseminate into a conference or a journal paper, and so on. And what happens after? So, like me and Ruth, we did a paper 3 years ago, 4 years ago. I can't remember now, Ruth. You know, but what we can do is we can always go back to that same question, but as time has moved on, many people have published many more studies which are now becoming relevant to be included. Equally, there will be hundreds more and thousands more which are being published, which are going to be in the exclusion list. So what we could do is we could run the search a few years down the line, 3 years, 4 years, and nowadays maybe just 2 years, because the number of publications are really racking up because of AI around. So you could revisit the same research question, see what up-to-date information tells you about your research question. Has there been any breakthrough in your area that people can now benefit from because you did a wonderful job 2 years ago, but since 2 years there's development in technology, development in you know uh, people's way of working, thinking, etc., etc., and maybe some new evidence has come which you could tell people about. So you could revisit your own systematic review and publish it again after a few years. But equally, other people can do that. So nothing's stopping you from taking somebody's previously done research, and the whole point is they would have stated how they got to that research, so you could replicate it easily, and that could be your contribution. Of course, you could ask the person, say, do you have any plans to do that again? And if they have, then maybe join up with them, or say, I'm planning to do something like this. Would you want to join, or you're happy for me to do it? That's just courtesy. I don't think there's any protocol out there for that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Ruth, on that. But anyways, so that's the in short the summary of the whole process. Okay, any questions from the floor? I'll take those first before I move on. Edith, you want to come in, or you just lowered the hand from before? I don't know.
I just wanted to ask you, thank you, Manish, for the presentation. Are you able to give us an indicative timeline? Or does that depend very much on the research question?
It depends on the number of papers you have and how you wish to divide the work. Now, that's a very good question. Let me just come back to that stage as well. So you can see my slides, right? So the first part is formulation of a question. That could normally take, a week or two if you're really focused to really get it right, because remember I talked about the iterative nature of this work. So you can come up with a research question right now. I say, what is it that you're interested in? You can tell me, oh, I'm interested in technology enhanced learning. I say, well, that's your intervention area, but it's too broad. You could say I'm interested in postgraduate students because I help them, use this in their research. So that could be one area. And I said, yeah, that's fine, postgraduate, but maybe you want to state the business or the subject area. What is it that you want to study? Um, but equally the outcome. So once you have shaped your research question well enough, I would say that that could take, depending upon the nature of the team, their availability, it could take a few days. Once you've got that, uh, you can just extract out the what is it, the records, the search records, and put them in an Excel file. That takes like few minutes, right? But then from there to then distribute the work amongst people, um, that could take some time, because depending upon the availability of your team. So now when me and Ruth were doing it, it was really a very, very diverse set of people who were doing it initially, um, and and people were available at different times, so we had to coordinate that. So when we can work in a team together. But if you were doing it on your own, I would actually say not to do it on your own, because it's not that you'll miss out on certain things which I'm going to talk about next. um, your paper will not be considered as reliable, um, because there will be nothing to compare your judgments against. So let's say you did it on your own, and you started off with 1000 abstracts, and you sat one afternoon and you said, okay, I'm going to go through every single one of them to apply my inclusion exclusion criteria, and I'll do it in an afternoon. Obviously you're going to get sick of it within 2-3 hours, so you won't be really able to get much progress on the 1000 papers. Maybe you will do 200, and then you'll have to stop because it's too repetitive. So over a week, maybe you can do 1000 papers over a week if you did it alone. But then people will have to have your word for it, right? They'll have to say, okay, well, so and so did this shortlisting. We just don't know whether this is correct or not. So to add that element of trust, you team up with somebody. You could get a research student with you, or you could have another colleague with you, who then look at, let's say, the same 50 or 100 papers or titles and abstracts, and independently come up with some kind of decisions. Obviously, apply the inclusion exclusion criteria, both of them. You do it, and then you compare the outcome. And in their outcome, you build something called as a confusion matrix, which means where do the two of you agree to keep the papers, where do the two of you agree to reject the papers, and where do the two of you differ, as in one says yes, keep it, the other says no, and vice versa. So there are these four combinations, okay, in this setting, in this scenario where two people are doing it. If more people are doing it, obviously you have these four possibilities between the every pair of the people who are doing it. So that could take, I think it will not take any more time, because 50 papers you can sit down in one afternoon and do it. But that will give you your work much more credibility, because then you have this figure which is called as the accuracy between, or inter-rater reliability between the two humans who looked at this work, and they came to some conclusions, and their conclusions matched, which is then can be represented by a number saying zero point 0.7 or zero point 0.6 or zero point 0.8 or 80%, 70%, 60% of the time they agreed, and the remaining time they didn't agree. By the way, the human value for such agreement is not very high. It is high, but it's not like 99 or 95%. It's only 80% or thereabouts. So the inter-rater reliability stats between humans does not go beyond 80% that often. So the average figure is 80. So it will go up, but that's not the norm. The norm is, so the average is around 80%. So if you can reach around that figure, that's good enough. But if you can't reach that, that's fine, and you report it as it is because that's the honest thing to do. You don't fudge the system to report a higher score. You say, okay, we agreed only 60% of the time, but then discussed. So some time need to be put aside for that discussion. So you do the discussion and you come to a conclusion that, okay, now we both are on the same page. We agree where we didn't, come to the same conclusion and why. We understand this through collaborative discussion. And then rest of the 950 papers, we can divide it into two chunks. So 425, 950, right? So they have now 475 one, 475 the other, and off they go independently after doing that inter-rater reliability test and discussions that follow from it. So then that way you're halving the time. So if I said 1 week for 1,000 papers individually, you could do it then if you really want to push and you have the time, you could do the title and abstract quick enough in 3-4 days. Okay, if you have the patience for it. But worst come worst, you will do it in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. That can be done. So that gives you some more idea of the time. But then there are other stages. The other stages are when you read the whole paper, and that's the more time-consuming stage. So let's say in the abstract and title stage, you're left with 300 papers. You've rejected everything else, and you agree, and you've shown that there is some reliability in your work. Then those 300 papers still need to be read fully. And each paper, I would say at least half an hour. Okay, so that's a lot of work. So if you divided that into two as well, but again, you need to do a little bit of an inter-rater reliability at that stage as well. So you extract the data that, let's say you take another 50 papers and you extract data from those 50 papers after the full read, and then you compare your results and you compute another inter-reliability statement. Sorry, not statement, figure, inter-rater reliability figure. And that could be again 60%, 70%, 80%, as I said earlier. And then you could have a discussion and you can learn from that discussion. And it's ready to go and do the remaining 250, okay, which we'll divide into two parts, 125, 125. We'll read and we'll extract the data. So as you can tell, the beneficial part of this process of having multiple authors is that each author has to do less work, and you can justify the splitting of the work into two or more people even by using this inter-rater reliability calculation. So effectively, if you had a team of 5, you would do it much quicker, right? So that's how you can see that. Does that answer your question? It's a very long answer, Edith, but it's a good question.
Thank you, Manish. That's very helpful. If I may ask a second question,
Go ahead.
Could you tell us what the rookie mistake, or at least give us at least a clue of a rookie mistake that you might have, made yourself when you first did the systematic review?
Ruth, do you want to come in?
I knew you were going to ask me that. There's so many you could probably make, and I think you learn more every time you do a systematic review. But I think one of the things that I remember is when I did a systematic review with some colleagues, is the assumption that everybody understands what you understand in the same way. So you have it probably very clear in your mind what you are intending to do as part of a systematic review, the key terms, what you're searching on, and what you're looking for. But other people might have a different interpretation or understanding. So if you do a pilot, if you do a small search and then get back together and have a discussion before you enter into a kind of larger process, that usually allows time for people to share their understanding and iron out any of those creases before you embark on the actual real thing. The other thing to do, I think, is to look for any existing systematic reviews to find out, has this already been done, or what has already been done in this area, to work out, what is the contribution that you are making. I know some people have recently done a systematic review looking at artificial intelligence, but it was just too early and they hadn't got enough papers, and that sort of comes to a little bit of an abrupt end. So there's a timeliness of what you're undertaking as well. There's quite a lot actually.
Yeah, every stage will have its own, and it's a stacked process. So you could make the mistake, and it's a new process, so it's a rookie mistake at each stage can happen. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Is there anybody from the floor here? Peter, Michelle, did you have any questions?
No, it all makes sense to me.
Okay, thank you for that. Then I think we're coming to the close. I do want to bring the session to close at 12:50. Is there anything else that we could discuss? I mean, I did say that there could be opportunities for working together, but hearing the interest from Peter and Michelle, I believe were more of how it's done rather than wanting to do. If is that correct?
Yeah, I was really here for learning about the fundamental aspects of how to perform a systematic review based on meta-analysis.
Oh, okay. So the meta-analysis part is obviously not covered in greater detail. I've just sort of touched upon it. But then, and that's a completely one or two sessions really on it. But hopefully, whatever I've highlighted has been helpful.
It's been really helpful. Thank you. I've learned a lot listening to that. I know at some stage I will be attempting to do a systematic review. And I'm trying to obviously learn as much as I can from those who are experienced like yourselves. So that's
Sure.
been really, really informative.
Okay, so at this point, what I can say is, if ever any of you wish to engage in a collaborative uh, systematic review opportunity, I don't know about Ruth. Do you wish to take another journey with people here, or with other people? Maybe when they watch the recording, they might want to come on. Just say, yeah.
If it's something that would be helpful to others, at the moment I'm working on another systematic review of some other colleagues. So in the short term, probably the answer is no, but happy to kind of contribute in any way.
Okay, good. So if that is the case, if anybody who's listening to this recording or people here would like to sort of learn by doing, we are happy to formulate a team, to put together a team and look at some perhaps interesting areas that are of interest to you. So I would be very interested to look at assessment, for example, in this current sort of setting where artificial intelligence is pretty much putting a lot of our assessments at risk. So what are the assessments that we could perhaps be a bit more put our trust in? But again, I guess um, anything around assessment I'm interested, not necessarily to do with AI, but AI always gets mentioned. So if it's assessments, so for example, exams, how do people revise for them? Exams, so I'm interested in that. But that's just me, talking out loud here. But if like that, you have your own areas that you're interested in and you want to learn by doing it, you could always reach out to me on my email, which is manish.malik@canterbury.ac.uk. I can type in here in the chat, and we can discuss, and we could do a collaborative project like that, and I'm happy to mentor and guide people to do it. And I have basically pre-designed sort of spreadsheets and things like that, which go along with the collaborative process. So if you're interested, just drop me a line. I'm putting in my email address in the chat. But I'd love to start one on exam revisions, because that's been something which I've been very interested for a long time, and I just haven't had made any start on it. But I can do when I have a team of people and so on. And I like to use artificial intelligence in the process, which may be thrown in this work. So if anybody's interested, it's an open call. So just reach out to me. Okay, so now it's 2:50, whatever. So I better go. I have to do another training. Busy, but that's how I like it. Thank you everyone for coming and your questions and your contributions. So thanks a lot. I'm going to stop recording.
Thank you for your time.